Tupac was always wary of the industry, but in the end, he ended up trusting the wrong people. The final betrayal that nobody really likes to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into some of this straight game.
Life is like the cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy Delray Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Do me a favor, click on the thumbs up button. Also, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And like I always say, if you want to be one of the first people notified when I drop some of the Straight Game, please do me a favor and click on what appears to be that little bell notification right below this video. I'm going to get right into it, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I've been accused of a lot of things. A lot of people think that I'm pro Suge Knight, or whatever have you, based on whatever topic involving Tupac that I'm speaking on. Like I said, but when I speak on Suge Knight, a lot of people always throw in the comments, yeah, you've been riding for Suge Knight. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't ride for anybody. There's nobody that's put any anything thrown my way in regards of a favor or anything of that nature. What I try to do is I try to weigh both sides of the story from a realistic standpoint, because there's a lot of unrealistic information that's been presented over the years in regards to this situation. And so what I'd like to do today is we're going to talk about something very uncomfortable but necessary, right? Everybody knows Tupac didn't trust the music industry, or if you haven't listened to his music, listen to his interviews, right? He said it openly, right? And he warned us, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of us who don't really understand, and, even in the end, he began to fester up and muster up a lot of discomfort, or should I say, just uncover a lot of truths, right? But what nobody likes to admit is this: Tupac trusted the wrong people close to him, right? And that betrayal didn't come from the suits or the executives, should I say, over on the side where they would like to blame, like the Jimmy Iovine's and the Ted Fields and all of these other people that they would like to blame, right? It came from the inside. It came from the people that he thought that he could run to, based on the pressure that was placed upon him at that particular time. And what I mean by that, if you go back to even, in New York, in the situation involving when he got robbed or they tried to assassinate him in New York. Once again, if you want to be perfectly honest and clear, Tupac had trusted the wrong people then. You know what I mean? He was hanging out with Haitian Jack. He was, hanging out with, the various street dudes, from that perspective. And it seems to me that it didn't end out like he thought it would end out. Like I said, that's not accusing Haitian Jack of anything, like I said once again, but one must be careful of the company that you keep. We are aware that Tupac made accusations in regards to Haitian Jack about him being a snitch. Like I said, that's never been proven. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's true or not. But like I said, once again, Tupac being in a position dealing with people of a certain caliber, of a certain character, always seemed to put him in, or should I say, on the wrong side of things. And you can take that, and I'll go with the time from the first time he was shot to the second time he was shot, right? And like I said, once again, same thing, same element. You understand what I'm saying? It was a street element. It was something that really didn't involve Tupac for whatever have you. Like I said, the first situation in New York, when you think about the big picture, is, a lot of it kind of stemmed from from just like I said, being involved with the wrong people. You know, Tupac dealing and dating Madonna at that particular time, Haitian Jack around, and you know they kicking it with Madonna and everybody cool, and some kind of falling out with the situation involving the young lady at the hotel, and then Tupac does an interview and says something that people thought was unbecoming or disrespectful, you know, and then wind up him going to Quad Studio and getting shot 5 times, right? And so then, you know, okay, and we go to, you know, Dannemora, you know, after the situation happened with the girl. The thing that's and that situation in itself, they go to Nels, you know, this club, after hours spot or whatever have you, and he meets the young lady. You know, from what he was saying that, you know, the young lady already knew some of the people that were there because they went there, and it was a situation that Tupac had just been introduced to, right? So here comes the situation with the girl. Goes back to the hotel. You know, they had been kicking it for a little minute, whatever have you, and then the second time or third time they get together and they go to the hotel room, and you know the situation happens, and who's the only person to really suffer from that situation? It was Tupac. Once again, the company that you keep. And a lot of rappers today really still didn't get the message and get the understanding that they truly honestly needed to get from that situation. A lot of people always like to, when they compare rappers today to Tupac, they're looking at this gangster, hardcore thug image or whatever they think it meant at that particular time. And they're taking it from the controversy standpoint and trying to bring a little bit of attention to themselves. But that's not it. Because see, the controversy, a lot of times the controversy today, a lot of it, you know, is manufactured, right? Who you're dating, blah, blah, blah. Somebody bought somebody a car. Somebody bought somebody a Rolls Royce, you know, a Ferrari, such and such is dating who, and so on and so forth. But when you go back to that time, 1995, 96, anything that was usually happening in the streets as far as Tupac was concerned was real. It was raw. There was nothing, you know, none of these publicity stunts that kind of go on today. And so, like I said, today's artists, they usually try to come and capture or want to capture some of that glory, or the fame or the legacy or the folklore of Tupac. And it's like, oh yeah, he like Tupac. He didn't. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. And so, like I said, even with the hotel situation, you know, once again, most people forgot about this because it was never really brought up. The guns that was left in the room, you know, they left guns in the room. You know what I mean? Once again, the wrong people, right? They left, ran out the room. You know, Tupac 3-4 guns in the room. You know, and it led to what people thought was, you know, gun charges on top of the situation that he was being accused of. And wrongfully accused of, and basically found guilty for something that, you know, normally wouldn't even be found guilty of. And we see now how prosecutions and things like that can be used against you if somebody wants to come after you bad enough. You know what I mean? And so that was the situation involving that. So now, because that situation happened, here comes another situation. Now he goes to what? He goes to Dannemora. Rikers Island first, and then he goes to Dannemora, the Clinton Correctional Facility. And in Clinton Correctional Facility, once again, you know, facing the time that he's facing, Tupac then gets approached. Well, I wouldn't even say approached, but the situation is made so that Tupac would appear that he was coming out and being under Death Row Records and accepting the offer. I wouldn't say made by just Suge, but they wanted to be able to, what Interscope wanted to be able to do was to capitalize off the moment, get Tupac out of jail. They already heavily invested. And so therefore he accepts the offer once again. Now, most people at that particular time, if they understood it, would have thought that, you know, I guess even Tupac, you know, getting out having his freedom. And we've heard, some of the people who had spoke with him, like I said, the prison guard and all of those people who spoke with him basically said he didn't care, who was getting him out. You know what I mean? He said the devil himself could have been getting him out as long as he was getting out of jail. I can understand that. Nobody wants to be in a maximum security prison in upstate New York, and being treated like it has been recorded that Tupac was being treated. The racism, the calling them the N-words and all of those things, right? And just being in bondage. So now he accepts that offer. He thought was a good thing. Would then I wouldn't say adopt a lifestyle. Yeah, I would say adopt a lifestyle in a subculture, in the gang culture and things of that nature, and began to associate himself, right, with the gang culture. Something Tupac had never really did up until that point. Up until that point, Tupac was always known to be thug life. That's what it was. That's what he represented. That's what he also represented in his music. You know what I mean? He said what he said in one lyric, say, I don't care if you blood or cuz, as long as you got love for thugs. And that was on not All Eyes on Me, but damn, I can't think of the album title right now, but the one before that while he was in prison, Me Against the World. There you go. Me Against the World. What he said? I don't care if you I don't care if you blood or cuz, long as you got love for thugs. And basically when Tupac said that separated him from anything that a person might have thought that he was involved with, affiliated with. Like I said, coming from Oakland, being up in Oakland, getting the game from Oakland, how things went up there, different from Southern California and how they do things. Like I said, the gang culture was not really, it was more player. You know what I mean? More player, more game, you know what I mean? Hustlers and things like that, you know what I mean? And so understanding what that meant, him accepting the offer with Suge, coming out, and we heard in a few of the songs, this is M.O.B. and blah, 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 right? Which Tupac really liked to say was money over bitches. But like I said, people, you listen to what I'm telling you, people will interpret whatever they want to interpret from what you're saying. You can tell them what it means, and they will come up with their own definition of what that actually is. And so therefore, and he's, like I said, he said it a few times, on his records. From what I understand, Tupac was never really affiliated with any kind of gang. You know what I mean? Like I said, I think he was affiliated with people who were active gang members, but I don't really think that he was truly indoctrinated into that lifestyle. But like I said, he was a chameleon, and he knew how to adjust accordingly to the environment that he was in, be it prison, be it, the situation in New York and being around, the New York hustlers and how they did things and so on and so forth. But it always appeared that he was the type of person that always had what they wanted, right? Coming into the situation in New York, Tupac was already a star. He was already doing his own thing. He already had a record deal, already doing movies. You know what I mean? He was already that guy. He had a name. He didn't need to really hang out with anybody, so much so as they needed to hang out with him. You know what I mean? I would say get their credibility up and notoriety up. The same thing I would say with Death Row. Tupac was already Tupac. Tupac was already a star, already doing movies. You know what I mean? Already had a #1 album before he went over there dealing with or under the guise of Death Row. So, like I said, but those two situations, I would say the Death Row situation and Tupac being who he was at that time, they complemented each other, right? Suge was already huge. He was doing his thing. He had Snoop, the Chronic album, and like I said, he was doing his thing prior to Tupac coming under that umbrella. And so by that being what it is, when you think about the big picture, here we come to, the situation already blew up with the East Coast, West Coast thing, which really wasn't that. It was a situation that Tupac was involved in that people saw. And you can think about it today. If you think about it today and how little situations on the internet, on YouTube and all of these other platforms get exploited, you know what I mean? Just like the other day, we heard about Charleston White supposed to have got shot. You know what I mean? Little situations like that. You can imagine back in the day without social media, when something was blew up, and only way that you would be able to get any kind of sense of what was going on at that particular time would be from the Source magazine Vibe magazine, Right On magazine, and all of the other publications that were available that could give you that information, right? So now you move to today, it's a little bit different, but back then you had to wait unless somebody with Tupac was on the radio speaking, once again, the incident that involved Snoop being on the radio out in New York saying basically, Biggie was his friends and so on and so forth. Like I said, and there being some kind of disenchantment from Tupac about that because he felt like he was putting it all on the line and everybody was supposed to fall in line with the loyalty and the aspect in which he was coming from because of what he was doing in the situation at that time, right? So now you understand where that was at and how that kind of went down because a lot of people today, they talk about stuff, but if you wasn't really back during that time, you really didn't understand the gravity of what was going on. You like I said, people were scared to come to Los Angeles, man. You know what I mean? They were scared to come to Los Angeles. People were, didn't really want to go to New York. And this wasn't because of social media. This was because of the mainstream media, and what they were talking about, what they were promoting, and I mean, Suge Knight was the big bad boogeyman. I mean, really though, and like I said, and they were really playing on the mystique of that at that particular time. But when you think about Tupac and his coming up to the final betrayal and dealing with the people that he was dealing with, like I said, there were a lot of people that were unqualified, ladies. I'm talking about simply unqualified. One of those people basically we already know was Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. He wasn't qualified to be security for Death Row, right? He wasn't qualified. He wasn't qualified to watch the front door of the studio that they had out there and where they had it at. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing. So when you talk about the loyalty, the silence, and the betrayal, ladies and gentlemen, in that situation and how people were so jealous and had so much animosity towards Tupac, and he didn't even really know, because his thing was, knocking out records, getting the records done, making the music, making the movies, and trying to do what he needed to do because he understood the situation that he was in when he signed over his when he basically gave a power of attorney to Interscope and Warner Brothers for getting him out of jail. Like I said, once again, Tupac knew this. Tupac understood that. Tupac understood what he had did, and that's why he was trying to work so hard to do what he needed to do to be able to, free himself and get free from that situation. But most people don't understand that. Like I said, when I said Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., he was unqualified. Once again, you got to understand, for somebody who knew that they were fired, right? Who knew that they were fired and would then tell everybody in the whole wide world that he didn't know. When the person who else was working with him, Frank Alexander, came out and admitted, he was like, hey, man, I thought I was fired. What happened? Tupac told him, hey, man, that wasn't about you. That was about Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. and his security company, right? This is 11 days before Tupac was shot in Vegas. So when I say unqualified, I mean unqualified in all respects, right? People who would lie about situations that they really didn't have to lie about. Hey, you know what? I was fired. I was fired by Tupac as his personal security, but I was still hired by Death Row, right? That's all that was needed. But the reason why, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. couldn't admit those things, he couldn't admit that, hey, I was fired, right? Because he couldn't handle the degradation or the rejection from one of the biggest artists in the world at that particular time. He couldn't handle it. And so he lied about it. He created these stories, up until when Tupac, and like I said, when you talk about the betrayal and the wrong people, you talk about when 11 days before Tupac was shot, you talk about Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. being fired on August 27th, right? So now, not as Death Row security, but as Tupac personal security. And then the cold part about that is he would then come out and then say, once I started to talk about it, he would come out and say, well, I didn't need that little $200 or $300 per security guard that I was making on him anyway, right? Ladies and gentlemen, he remembered how much money it was that he was being paid for those situations, to understand that he was fired from those situations, to say that what? I didn't really need that money no way. Well, why for so many years did he deny that he was fired? He remembered the money that he wouldn't need. If you remember the money that you wouldn't need, then that's basically saying that that's money that you would be missing because you were what? Because you were fired, right? Knowing this, as Keefy D has said and alluded to, Suge alluded to, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. would then, on September 7th, 1996, sabotage Tupac's security. He would sabotage Tupac's security, ladies and gentlemen. That is not a rumor. That is not an insinuation. That is not speculation. That is a fact. That is a fact. And the fact of the matter, up until recently, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. had said what? Why Tupac had enough security. And he wasn't talking about the security that worked for him. He was talking about the homies that were with Suge's friends from the neighborhood who Suge, whether he put on the payroll or not, they were hanging around, and everybody that was in Vegas that night. So when Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. once again, because he had took his security off of Tupac, the only person was left was the person who thought they were fired, who Tupac said, no, Frank, that wasn't about you. That was about Reggie. Right? Right? And I want you to understand something. I want you to understand something. And this is what I want you to understand, that most people don't get Reggie's thinking at that particular time. You know what it was? And I'm going to tell you why he did what he did. And when Suge asked him to send more security guards, because I just thought about this. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was thinking like, Vegas wasn't a music industry event, right? Vegas wasn't an official death row event. Get it? Remember, Frank told us that Tupac said it wasn't about him and he was going to take Frank with him. Frank was the only person on Tupac that night at the MGM. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was like, fuck Tupac. You heard the tape that he had put out after Yasmin Fula released the facts. The tape that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. put out, basically saying those exact words, and I quote, fuck that nigga, right? I didn't need that little $200, $300 I was getting from him anyway. And that's how he felt. The reason why he felt that, because he felt like that night in Vegas was a fight night. It wasn't a death row official business music industry night, right? But when Suge Knight told him, as well as Frank Alexander said he told him to send more security, he didn't send it. That was Reggie the Rat Wright Jr.'s position. That was his understanding. That's why he took Michael Moore off of him, right? And that's why Frank was the only one on him. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. You got the biggest rap artist in the world, the #1 album in the world, right? He got one security guard on him, walking through the MGM Grand and around Vegas a little bit early that evening. Michael Moore was with him and on him along with Frank, right? But more importantly than that, why would he take Michael Moore off of him? Right? Because he was still salty. And like I told you, that's motive, right? Whether most people say, well, we thought of it, it was a setup, it was this. Whatever you want to call it. It was negligence, right? Right? He disobeyed a direct request from the boss. Ladies and gentlemen, this was unknown to Afeni Shakur and them at the time. All of this was really unknown. It came out a little bit later. Remember, the facts came out later after Afeni Shakur was deceased. So, but I'm thinking that had she known this, she would have filed some kind of a wrongful death situation involving her son based on the fact that there was negligence involved, right? There was pure disregard for the chain of command and what was supposed to happen. That's the reason why I say what I say in regards to, the wrong people, the loyalty, the silence, right? The untold truth, the lies. You get it? So that's the reason. That's the reason why he pulled them off. But he can't say that. He can't say that. He has to keep up the what's the name, and then would push it back to what, April, June. I talked to Suge at the House of Blues, and he's asked me, why you ain't got no security on Tupac, Reg? Right? We know, ladies and gentlemen, factually that it was August. We know it was August. We've seen the facts. Right? But he would try to make it into April. Why? Why would he try to make it when Tupac allegedly fired him at that time? Allegedly, I say allegedly, but now we know factually fired him. Why would he try to make it and push it to April? Back to April 96 instead of August 96. Because then you would be able to put the 2 and 2 together and saying, oh, that's why he did that. Oh, that's what Suge was talking about why you ain't got no security on Tupac. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you one more time, that was in Vegas. That was in Vegas. That wasn't at the House of Blues. That was in Vegas. Frank Alexander talked about it. But Reggie tried to change the story to make it look like it was in April instead of in Las Vegas after Tupac was shot. You see? Frank had told him to add more security. So I just want to give that understanding for most people that don't, because people are not talking about that. They'll do interviews with Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., talking about this. They won't ask him the real questions. Like I said, once again, they won't ask him. And that's just the beginning of it, right? Then we hear about the got him, all of that. He lied about all of that. He lied about it happening in the club. He tried to, talk about the music was loud. But then when he wanted to tell the story about how he found out about the situation and allegedly who told him about, who was responsible for the shooting, he wanted to inject Suge into it. Suge called him a liar, right? Reggie said, yeah, when I went to the hospital, Suge told me. No, Suge came out and said, no, Reggie never came to my hospital room. He wasn't allowed, right? And then to try to get us to believe that, he went to the hospital, then that's when he brought Michael Moore into it. Yeah, y'all remember Michael Moore said, right before me and Mr. Wright went to the hospital. But yeah, okay, he said that. But he also said that when he was getting in the car to go to the hospital with Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. and the lawyer, George Calisis, right? He said he heard on the radio what? Got him. Everybody be quiet. Don't say nothing over the radio. You see what I mean? So conveniently wanting to use one thing to back up another, but then forgetting all at the same time that he had lied about the situation altogether. Lied about the whole situation altogether. Okay, no, and then you go to Frank. No, Frank, this is what we gonna say. Say he tried to snatch Tupac's chain. Say Orlando tried to snatch Tupac's chain. What? You see what I mean? And all of the lies and so like I said, you don't have to tell these lies if you don't have a consciousness of guilt, ladies and gentlemen. There's no reason to tell those lies if you don't have a consciousness of guilt. Then lying about, how he found out about it. Gullible John, like I said, I go over this. Gullible John asks him what? So Reggie, when did you find out about, what had happened? How long did it take you to find out what had happened? I played y'all the OG Patrice video when he said it. But then he told Gullible John, it was about 3 days later. No, it wasn't. His father said that he called him soon after that. Soon after that. Told him who it was, what was going on, names and all of that. Yeah, Reggie had called me and told me, what was going on, But then when it came time to really sit down and admit, you go look at the video, Reggie do the cough move. Daddy, you talking too much. You know what I mean? Once again, so when we understand what's been really going on with this situation involving Tupac was dealing with he trusted the wrong people who really didn't have his best interests at heart. Doesn't make him any less of a legend, right? But that's just simply what it was. And then hold on, no, it don't stop there. It don't stop there. So now as time goes on, he wants Frank to come in and to cover for Suge in regards to what happened in Vegas, in regards to Suge about to be violated, right? right? Frank, you telling the public, I want Frank to come in, speak to the police officers about the situation that happened in Vegas, saying that, Suge didn't kick him or whatever, right? That's what he's saying publicly, but behind the scenes, there's threats being made against Frank's life, right? Michael Moore's on the phone. Frank's recording the conversations. Michael Moore telling him, hey, man, they want you dead. Frank like, who? He like, yeah, Reggie, blah, 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 blah. Y'all heard the recordings for the people who know what I'm talking about? I'm like, what? When I listened to that, I was like, wow, really? Like, dude, you thinking that you on the security team and this is a legit company and paying you and doing all of these things. Hold on, man. You talking about somebody talking about they want something, do something to you based on the fact of what? That you was the only person there with Tupac at the MGM Grand? You supposed to be the hero. But here it is, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. at that time, he's trying to play hero. He's trying to play cover-up man. Let me conceal this with a lie, and that with a lie, so that the truth will never really come out, right? But we find out because Frank Alexander recorded Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. on the phone saying what? Frank, if you duck the subpoena, everything should be cool. But in the public, he telling everybody, I need Frank to come, forward and tell everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the most disingenuous shit that you could ever possibly hear. You see what I'm saying? Somebody professing one thing in the public and then being recorded on the tape saying something totally different behind the scenes involving something so spectacular and important as the murder of one of the biggest hip-hop artists ever to live. So that told me right there, if he was doing all of these things right, he didn't give a fuck about Tupac. You see what I'm saying? And let me take you to this one. I want to give you this because a lot of people not really grasping on to this, man. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was always jealous of Suge Knight. He was always jealous of Suge Knight. And I'm going to get to Suge in a moment, the part that I disagree about what he did. You know what I mean? In that same respect, because the optics of it really didn't look right. I can understand what he was trying to do at that particular time, right? Because of what he was fighting for and all of those things. But ladies and gentlemen, like I told you before, for the people that don't really know, and like I said, hit the like button, hit this thumbs up button. Like I said, for the people who don't really know this, ladies and gentlemen, let me break this down to you. 3 days, and I'm going to say it again, 3 days, this is facts. 3 days after Tupac died, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. went to the Los Angeles Police Department and basically told them that Suge Knight had gang members on the payroll. They was from Compton, right? And they had guns. This was why Suge was in the studio. So soon after Tupac, 3 days after Tupac, on the 16th, Suge them at the studio. Whatever they were doing, I don't know. But Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. is talking to the police. He's informing the police that Suge Knight has gang members from Blood. He said, no, as a matter of fact, it was Blood gang members from Compton on the payroll, right, as his security, and they got guns. This is the person who's supposed to protect Suge Knight, Tupac in Las Vegas. It's his job. But he said, no, Tupac had security on him. He had the homies, the homeboys on him. Ladies and gentlemen, remember I just told you that's what he said. Tupac had a bunch of security. He had the homeboys on him. Ladies and gentlemen, the homeboys that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was saying that was security that Tupac allegedly had on him that night when we seen it was just him and Frank walking through the MGM at that particular time. There's video of it. Like I said, once again, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has been trying to defy video footage with his words, right? We seen it was Frank and Tupac walking through. Not. I'm talking about this is before the fight when Tupac is actually walking to the fight, right? After we see Suge, Tupac, and everybody, and that's when Tupac all hyped up after Mike Tyson knocked old boy out, right? So we seen what was going on. But the very security that Reggie was professing that was with Tupac, other than Frank, which he was saying was the 3 days after Tupac was dead, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was talking to the police saying, They got guns. They blood gang members. The very people he was professing that was supposed to be the security. You tell me that ain't some low down shit. You see what I'm saying? That's beyond low down, because it's like I don't even know how to how do you justify that? Like, the guy who Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. claimed that he just was grew up with, gave him a job and all of this thing. And not to admit that the same thing, like I said, involving Tupac. So when you think about it, now, Keefy D said that he saw Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. in the car, in the entourage of cars. Now, I don't know where, but this was in 2009. Keefy D said Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., he saw Reggie and Frank Alexander, the pretty light-skinned dude, in the entourage of cars. Now, I don't know where Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. could have been, but this is what Keefy D told. Listen, this is going to come out in the trial. This is going to come out in the trial, ladies. I'm telling you. Listen to what I'm telling you, because I did the video about it, but that's going to come out in the trial, right? If Keefy D take the stand, that question is going to be asked. So you said in 2009, as, right before the shooting happened, right? Which I don't think it, because this is when he's admitting to it to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. You said in 2009 that right before the shooting, you were riding down as you guys were looking inside the cars to try to, see what car Tupac and Suge was in or whatever, right? That you seen Reggie, correct? You see what I'm saying? You see how that works? So now, flip it back to the homeboy security, right? And Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. telling the LAPD, there they go. They make a traffic stop. Suge and them keep going. MC Hammer pulled over. Basically took the heat off of Suge and them. I guess they didn't know what car Suge was in or whatever, and Hammer pulled over, right? I wonder, do MC Hammer ever think about that? Or did Hammer really know, like, did he read the article afterwards to find out that, hey, you know what? It was Reggie who put the police on him that day. You get it? I'm talking about, right, the wrong people around. Tupac trusting the wrong people, right? Unbeknownst to him at that particular time, because like I said, once again, he's coming in as an artist, trying to complete his Interscope contractual obligations that was appeared to be like it was actually Death Row, but it was Interscope. Like I said, he still owed them 3 more albums off of his initial record deal that he had signed with them through his own company, right? Out the Gutter Records. We came to find that out later on too. So there was a lot that we didn't know, right? That we found out later that, Pac wasn't signed to Death Row. He was still signed his own independent label, Out the Gutter Records, via Interscope. Point blank, period, right? So now, Reggie does all of this. What is Reggie trying to do at that particular time? Reggie's trying to get rid of Suge Knight. See, it didn't happen like they wanted it to happen in Vegas, right? Think about it for a minute. He's trying to get rid of Suge Knight. Why would he go tell the police on Suge? Listen, Suge just went through a catastrophic shooting, right? Being hit in the head. Keefy D saying, like, I seen the bullet go in Suge's head. I thought he was dead. That's what Keefy D said, right? So Suge just went through something so catastrophic, right? And here it is, Reggie. He ain't got no sympathy. He telling the police. He got gang members on the payroll. Think about that. Think about the consciousness or the conscience it takes to be able for somebody to do something like that, man. And they weren't even, listen, they were supposed to be there to protect you, right? They weren't even there to protect you. And then on top of not being there to protect you, they go run to the police 3 days after your main artist, the biggest artist in the world at that particular time, on the top of the charts, Tupac Shakur, dies. You get it? You get it? So when Keefy D says to Suge at the Nets game, yeah, this is what happened, this is how it went down, and yeah, security was involved too. Why wouldn't you believe that? Keefy D knows something that we don't know, right? You know what I mean? Why wouldn't you, he knows something that we don't know. Now I believe that think about this, and I want you to understand something. When Suge said that on the Art of Dialogue, like I said, a lot of people could not put the 2 and 2 together. They couldn't put the 2 and 2 together. I want you to think about it from this perspective. if in and around the year that Suge was talking about that him and Keefe D ran into each other at the Laker, New Jersey Nets game, right? And in around that time. So now, from that date all the way up until, 2025, when Suge just did the interview on Art of Dialogue, Suge knew about that. I want you to hold on to that. See, this is where I get into the Suge part. Suge knew about what Keefe D told him about security being involved, what he said on the Art of Dialogue. Correct? That would mean he knew what was it 2014, 2004, whatever year that was. Suge Knight knew, from what he was saying, that Keefe D told him that security had something to do with it, and he alleged that Sean P. Diddy Combs had put the hit on him and Tupac. And Suge Knight said Keefe D told him the amount of money and all of that. Keefe D confirmed that before Suge did on Vlad. Now, let me give you this. So Suge knew at that time, all those years, right? Now, at this time, Death Row, I believe Death Row is basically Suge kind of, rummaging back through it or whatever, and it's done. I think his 9 years he's out for the 9 years from the violation situation, right? And so now, my thing is, I don't know what kind of relationship Suge had with Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. after that. Once he found out that information, I don't know what it was like, but I don't really think it was anything, right? And did he ever read the article about what Officer Yamamoto and them talked about in regards to Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. informing them that there was blood gang members on the payroll? That's when you got to really, really ask yourself, like, wow, Suge knew that all the time. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., he knew that. Think about it, y'all. He ain't had no reason to go to the police. You know what I mean? He should have been trying to, protect Suge as much as he could. But guess what? Suge was done with him. And so when people said, they asked that question, well, why Suge let Reggie run the label? Suge never let Reggie run the label. It wasn't like that. Like I said, Michelle A. ran the label, ran Death Row at that particular time. Reggie was an in-between guy. He was a liaison, go see Suge and tell him this and tell him that stuff you can't say on the phone and so on and so forth, right? He never ran Death Row. That's why he came out with that bogus pamphlet called the Tales of a Label Boss. What label boss? What, when, where? You know what I mean? Like I said, he's supposed to be a label boss. When I did the interview on the Art of Dialogue saying that Tupac wasn't signed to Death Row, you think that he should have been attacking me or agreeing with the fact that Tupac wasn't signed to Death Row if he was a label boss and he really knew what was going on? Think about that. He said he ran Death Row. Well, he would have known that Tupac wasn't signed to Death Row if he ran Death Row. But yet he decided to jump on the other side of the wagon and be like, no, who is this dude? He don't know what he talking about. The paperwork fake. Y'all shouldn't believe him. You know what I mean? When in fact, it was all true. It was all real. How do we know that? We know that now because Suge Knight came out and said it just recently. You see what I'm saying? So now, understanding those things that we understand now, I get the Suge Knight. Well, my thing was, I'm like, wow. Once I found out, because I wasn't really sure, that he paid Orlando $60,000 to come and testify on his behalf. Now, the first thing I understand, should I say, the first problem I had with that was it wasn't well thought out from the beginning. And and I'll say it. The reason why I say that is because it's on video. Suge Knight kicking Orlando. It's on video. You can see it. Like I said, once again, people can see things and tell themselves whatever they want to tell themselves, right? The judge saw it. The world saw it. You can see it, right? Like I said, once again, but Orlando was paid to come in and say, hey, nah, he was trying to break it up. Okay, this was the play at that particular time. But then I go back. Then I go back to Tupac. And I go back to what he thought that it all meant. And you got, listen to me. When you hear Tupac talk about him and Suge's relationship, He's like, Suge's like a big brother, you know what I mean? We went to Hawaii. He was like, we went to Hawaii, we tossed it up, we did this, we did that, you know what I mean? Suge got the red Rolls Royce, Pac, he got the black one, Snoop had the cream colored one, you know what I mean? And so on and so forth, right? So when you think about all of those, the things that Tupac thought in regards to the situation, I don't doubt that there was no real love or real connection there, right? But I thought to myself, I was like, well, damn, what would Tupac say if he knew that the guy that they were just in the situation with, I ain't even talking about whether Orlando Anderson was the shooter or not. I ain't talking about that part. I'm talking about the guy that they were just in the MGM jumping on, right? That is a fact. That's on video, right? Just dealing with the facts. That Suge would then turn around and pay him to say that he didn't do it, that he wasn't one of the people that was a part of that, right? I just wonder what Tupac would think about that. Not what I would think about it personally. I can't infuse myself into what that is. I don't agree with it. I'll never understand that. I just will never understand it. You know what I mean? For all intents and purposes, for what people said that the lifestyle was about, being down with, the people that you were down with. And that's why I said, like I said, Tupac, he bought into some things, right? That then once again, the loyalty, once again, the silence, right? And the truth that's untold, right? You got to really, truly, honestly think about that, because then it was unbeknownst to the public. Then it came out. So this was like some kind of backdoor deal. And I understand why David Kenner was doing the things that he was doing, because once again, more importantly, it was about the situation that David Kenner had solidified for Interscope, on behalf of Interscope, in the situation of getting Tupac out of jail, ladies and gentlemen. David Kenner was, when you look at that paperwork, it was done by him, his law firm. You see what I'm saying? And so there were certain things that he had to do, but $60,000, I really didn't get it. Orlando was also planning on suing the Suge and everybody in that situation in regards to that situation, but I don't know if that lawsuit ever happened or went through based on that payment. So there's a lot of nuances that were connected to that. And so when you think about that, you gotta, but I just go back to the fact that, in their, I would say, 11-month relationship, as far as professionally was concerned, you know what I mean? Other than other times they might have, I think it was a soundtrack, the soundtrack Tupac did for Suge. But in that that relationship, Suge saying, hey, Tupac was like a little brother, blah, 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 and, he loved Pac and so on and so forth. And he alleged that Tupac, the last words that Tupac said to him was, I love you, you know what I mean? And all of these things, I couldn't see, understand, and this is just me, you don't have to agree with what I couldn't see and understand why he would pay Orlando $60,000 to come in the courtroom and say, hey, nah, he didn't kick me, he was trying to break it up, when it's actually on tape. I don't know who thought that one through, who tried to convince the judge that what he was seeing, that he was, the judge that convicted you, who was trying to convince the judge that what he was seeing, he actually wasn't seeing. But like I said, you can play that with lay people, with people in the public eye, there's nothing that really can happen, But when you're involved in the court of law, you're dealing with a judge. And his job is to seek out justice, right? Based on Suge's background and so on and so forth. I'll never be able to understand that one. And so, and not questioning his loyalty to Tupac, but like I said, Tupac's loyalty to him, you know what I mean, and to the situation that he was involved with at that time. You hear Tupac yelling on, like people say, they say it all the time. Yeah, Tupac was yelling Death Row on the records. Yeah, he wasn't supposed to be yelling Interscope, out the gutter. He wasn't supposed to be. Tupac knew the part that he was supposed to play, right? He knew who and how and what and why, right? It was explained to him, and he did what he had to do. So like I said, once again, when you think about the big picture of what it was and what that really meant, and then at the end, when it all came down to it, it was like, who really had Tupac's back? from that perspective. I know Frank Alexander wrote a book, basically titled something like that, but who really had Tupac's back? And like I said, that's the thing that people don't really talk about. You know what I mean? And the bigger picture of it all of the lies that were told. And then when it came down to it, the situation involving Keefy D and like I said, involving that situation, like we got some real good stuff coming for you. Like I said, stay tuned. Coming over on the Art of Dialogue. I just did an interview. I'm not gonna talk about it, but I just did an interview, and it's gonna be a lot of truth revealed that you didn't know nothing about, y'all. I'm just gonna tell you that real. It's gonna be a lot of truth revealed that y'all didn't know nothing about, and because I was blown away. I was like, oh wow, that happened. Whoa, So like I said, once again, I just needed to make this video because I think it's important that people know the truth and know the facts. And like I said, you're hearing a lot of people out here spitting innuendos because they really don't have anything to talk about. But the truth never really changes. So if you hear me sometimes say the same thing or kind of touch on the same thing, it's because the truth never really changes. It's the lie that adjusts its point of view, its perspective based on the people that it's in front of and who they trying to convince that they know and what they know and all of. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just giving you the game straight cut, like it's supposed to be. Like I said, once again, should I say uncut like it's supposed to be? You know what I mean? But more importantly, I had to do this video. You know what I mean? And because, just to keep it in its proper perspective. Like I say, the final betrayal was a Tupac Shakur that nobody wants to admit. The loyalty, silence, and the truth be told. And the truth be told, because like I said, once again, all of those things, and even up until now, you got the court case coming out. Like, and I would think that all of the no snitching and the snitching and everybody's snitching and ain't nobody snitching because this with that, man. Let me tell you something, man. That shit is long gone. It's long gone, man. It's long gone. You know what I mean? Dudes now is justifying why they should tell and who they should tell on. They wearing wires, they wearing secret phones and all of these other things that they doing. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, I would think that Suge basically said at one time, free Keefy D, until he understood what was really going on. And see, a lot of people got caught up with that one too. I really didn't get caught up with it. I was like, he's saying that for a reason. You know what I mean? He's saying that for some reason. But then as he said on the Art of Dialogue, you got to go listen to the interview when he said it on Art of Dialogue. He was like, he said that, but then he said once he found out the truth, once he found out what was really going on, then he changed his tune. He was saying that based on the fact that he would never want to see somebody in jail, Keefy D in jail, whether it was true what he was saying about what his involvement with the situation was or not. That's when he said free Keefy D, right? But then once he kind of heard everything and everything was laid out and what was said, he changed his perspective. Go listen to the Art of Dialogue interview, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, people want to hear what they want to hear. They'll take that little bit that they heard and try to run with it and create a whole narrative around what that means, right? They'll try to take it out of what we call take it out of context. That's not how it's done, right? You got to deal with the full context, even if it does not benefit your argument. Because you may appear to be right or look right. The optics of what you're saying might appear like you know something, right? But once the people get the truth, now your credibility's gone. Like, oh, he just wanted to, he wanted to shine. He was doing some clout chasing, you know what I mean? He was doing, he was doing some look at me, you know what I mean? To see what I know. Nah, that ain't what this is about. This is about putting it in its proper context so that you have the information so that you're informed. That's simply it, right? Being right about this, that it ain't nothing to be right about. A lot of people lost their lives. People in the penitentiary right now. You know what I mean? Diddy included. Like I said, for all intents and purposes. Like I said, I don't know if he put the hit on him or not. That's what Keefy D said. You feel me? And that's what continues to be reiterated up until recently with the Diddy Reckoning documentary. You know what I mean? So, anybody trying to paint any other kind of picture with one little segment or something and being like, oh, they know something that somebody did. It's totally irresponsible. It's irresponsible. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Shout out to everybody in the chat. You know what I mean? You say Frank, yeah, like I said, a lot of people said that Frank got taken out by somebody. Like I said, once again, I don't believe that. From what the evidence shown. Yeah, Frank had talked about, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, if you know anything about Frank and you listen to the interviews, Frank talked about being suicidal. Frank talked about being suicidal and committing suicide. And so that's not a far-fetched thing. Like I said, I don't really want to give people credit or credibility for something that they didn't have nothing to do, or try to blame somebody for something that they didn't have to do that's unproven. You know what I mean? You know, like I said, once again, it's not about trying to be the person who, you know, can, like I said, if you listen to Frank's story and when him talking, he did a couple interviews, he was talking about he wanted to commit suicide. He was ready to commit suicide. That wasn't the first time that he had talked about that. So if you don't know anything about that, you would back up off of, you know, somebody did something to Frank without real proof. You know what I mean? My thing is I don't want to put nothing on nobody that they didn't do, or just trying to be incendiary and say some incendiary shit to get you to think that, you know, that's not what this is about. You don't got to do that. Like I said the other day, you ain't got to lie to kick it, man. You ain't got to lie. We kicking it right here. We keeping it straight, and we going to keep it with straight game. You dig? Like I said, people said Perez and Mac. Like I said, I really don't know anything about that. So like I said, you know, if you know something about that, I suggest you start a YouTube channel and put us up on the game that you know about it. Because if you hearing it from somebody else, and they haven't gave you the foundation of the information that they have in regards to the allegations that they're making, then it's lies. Then it's untrue. Then it's speculation. You know what I mean? You could take it lies, untrue, speculation, their opinion, their theory. You can go with either one of those. But as to David Mack, Perez, I don't know nothing about none of their involvement, alleged involvement. I've heard a lot of stuff, right? But I have not seen any clear-cut evidence in regards to that. You see what I'm saying? Everything that I just gave you, I gave you the clear-cut of what that is. Somebody, we say Suge deflecting by lying, seemed like he not snitching. Suge been knowing the truth. Like, yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, if you go, and this is what I'm telling you, if you go listen to the Art of Dialogue interview, you'll understand what Suge is saying, and I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm not gonna say whether he lying, whether he telling the truth. I know some things he said, you know, wasn't true. You know what I mean? The fact that Tupac was still alive, he had made that video, but I thought he was being facetious on that one. I don't think that he was actually being, you know, he was being genuine, like I said, because people, you know, always run up in his face and ask him questions at that particular time with a microphone. He was being facetious. But this Art of Dialogue interview, if you want to be perfectly honest, I thought Suge was sharing a little bit of his soul. You know what I mean? He was getting a lot off his chest that he hadn't got off his chest for years. And he felt comfortable to talk, not because he was talking to the Art of Dialogue, but because of what the information that he had found out and what had been revealed to him. So now he felt like he could be unrestrained in his conversation that he had. No, Tupac, I'm not going to say that, but I could say, I'm not going to say Tupac should have stayed in jail. Tupac would have been better off in jail. You know what I mean? He would have been better off in jail, doing his time, coming out, or what I would say like this. And this is the thing. You got to understand, this is what a lot of people, so Tupac was granted, he won his appeal, right? Tupac won his appeal, and then they decided to go and get him, right? But the crux of them going to get him, the information and the truth that would stand on that is that he would be with Suge Knight, because they thought, Jimmy Iovine and them thought that Suge Knight could keep a watch over Tupac, which was their investment. It was business, right? At that particular time. You see what I'm saying? And so with that understanding, when you understand that, then you get it. You don't jump to any kind of conclusions as to all of this other stuff. It was a business move. It was a business move, right? And so when I say he should have stayed in jail, so eventually we saw Tupac win the appeal. He was going to get out of jail, right? But for whatever reason, Tupac thought that he should sign a death row or agree to be under that umbrella was his decision. You see what I'm saying? He could have been like, nah, you know what? He won the appeal, but the appeal didn't give him bail, right? And so that's what I'm thinking the bail situation involved, as we saw. Yeah, you get out on bail, but you go over there with death row and you finish the last 3 albums that you have under your contract. It's just that simple. Like I said, it's not really hard to understand. It's not hard to understand at all. It's business, simple record industry business, and they had an investment and so on and so forth, right? Yeah, well, I don't know, big dog, man, whether Reggie admitted it to anybody, man. Like I said, well, I know what he said in public, like I said, I don't want to get into the speculation of the situation, right? He said Greg Caden have everybody on dumb time. Now, he don't have me on dumb time. Like I said, once again, we going to see what happened during this trial, though. That's what we going to see. And like I told you, it's a lot that's going to come out that we haven't heard, that we definitely haven't heard and haven't seen. So, you know what I mean? Like I said, but I wanted to do this video because, like I said, a lot of people are not really talking about that honestly. And, the situation that led up to it and why it's such a still hot topic today. It's still a hot topic today. There's so many nuances and angles and stories that people want to come in and be like, yeah. But like I said, there's my story, there's your story, then there's the underlying truth. You know what I mean? And that's usually backed by documentation, evidence, and audio or video. You know what I mean? So like I said, once again, I appreciate everybody for coming through tonight. Thank you for listening. For the new people who have not subscribed to the channel, please do. Like I said, I appreciate each and every one of you, your time, your energy, and all of those things. Like I said, your boy Delray, straight gang.
Blackjack. Life is like cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
They said Tupac was untouchable, but behind the walls of Rikers Island, he was just a man, wounded, watching his back, and wondering who he could trust. He survived bullets, betrayal, and isolation behind bars. But what happened inside those walls has never been told until now. In the darkest corner of Rikers, he found betrayal and a brotherhood no one saw coming. These dudes smiled in my face, then flipped and tried to kill me, and I never saw it coming. They were Puff's security, Biggie's muscle, Henchman's people, and Tupac knew exactly who sent them. This is the side of Tupac Shakur the world never got to see, told by the man who lived it with him, not in the studio, but in a 6x9 cell. The rap battles, sex and drama with female guards, the tears, the silence after Jada Pinkett's visit, and the moment Tupac almost broke. Before death row, before All Eyes on Me, before Machiavelli, there was Rikers. Behind the Walls with Tupac Shakur, available now on Amazon. Get your copy. Learn the truth.